Welcome to the BrainTap podcast, here to help you relax, reboot, and strengthen your overworked brain. Your host, Dr. Patrick Porter, has been developing cutting-edge brainwave training technology for 3 decades. He's been featured in national publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, and Inc. magazine, as well as major television networks such as NBC, CBS, and the Discovery Channel. Dr. Porter's latest development, the BrainTap Pro mobile app, can help you sleep better, lose weight, de-stress, quit smoking, or kick any other bad habit, all while increasing your energy, mindfulness, joy, peak performance, and more. Take the free BrainTap Pro Challenge. Simply register at braintap.pro. That's braintap.pro. On the BrainTap podcast, Dr. Porter brings together a team of experts to share up-to-the-minute news in neuroscience, brain training technology, along with how mindfulness and meditation can be used to improve your life in ways you never imagined possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Patrick Porter.
Hello, this is Dr. Patrick Porter, and welcome back to BrainTap Radio. Today I have a very special guest, and one that we don't always get to do. I actually went to your office and got to see this wonderful technology at work that you've put together and kind of done things. And who I'm talking about here is Dr. Andrew Petersen. So Dr. Petersen, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up, what got you into the medical field, and how you thought so differently. I mean, what you do is so different than what we typically see in a DO's office.
Yeah, sure. Patrick, thank you for having me on this show. I really appreciate it. How I grew up. My dad was in the military. We lived all over. And it's sort of ironic, when you're growing up an Army brat, the only doctor you see is when you go into like the sort of, it's just, I guess it's like an urgent care, right? And I didn't have any idea, being a naive child, that there were other kinds of doctors. I always loved science. I loved talking to people. That's probably my favorite thing to do, is talk to people. And so I because we moved around so much, we were going to move for my senior year, and I thought, well, I don't want to be a senior at a new school, so I'll just skip my senior year of high school and go to college. So I did that, and I had never taken a biology class in high school. That's because of the move and the transitions. I missed the 9th grade biology, and then my new school biology was as a senior. At any rate, I finally took a biology class in my freshman year of college, and was fascinated. Because I was so young and so naive, I thought to myself, "Oh, I want to do something in this line of work. I wonder what I could do where I would be involved with people, and at the same time, biology." And only 2 thoughts came to mind. Because I was so naive, I was like, well, I guess if my grades are good, I'll be a doctor. And if they're not quite as good, then I'll be a school teacher. That was like, those are the only 2 choices, right? Of course, I must have had good enough grades. I went on and became a physician. But really, I almost feel like what I enjoyed more was the teaching aspect and being a school teacher. And so as a physician, I went to the University of North Texas, and I went to Penn State for residency. And what I really enjoyed was spending time talking to my patients and educating them about what was going on physiologically in their body. That experience of wanting to spend time talking to my patients and really help them understand what was going on, I think, is what changed my practice. It didn't happen right away, but it happened over the course of several years. I certainly didn't start out practicing integrative medicine.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of my questions, is what had you shift from just working with the typical patient to working with the chronically ill patients that you work with now? That, I mean, you're almost on their last leg, if you will, and you're kind of reviving their life and restoring their vitality.
Yeah. So I went into family medicine, again, probably indecisiveness. I thought, I like all these aspects of medicine. I like surgery, I like emergency medicine, I like family medicine, I like OBGYN. It all seems amazing to me. And so I went to a residency in family medicine. And then I thought, well, if I really want to practice the full scope of medicine, I better practice in a rural town, because if I were to practice in a big city, I'd get pigeonholed, and I don't get to do any of the things that the specialists do, right? I would just refer them to the specialist. So I practiced in a little tiny town in Texas, in the panhandle of Texas. We were very remote. about 5 hours to Dallas, 3 hours to Lubbock, 3 hours to Oklahoma City, 2 hours to Amarillo, really in the middle of nowhere. And it was me and a friend of mine who I'd gone to med school with, who were the only two doctors in town. And we got to do everything. And these farmers, they did not want to go somewhere else to get their care. And so I found myself reattaching toes, reattaching ears. These are things that should go to a hand specialist or a plastic surgeon. I found myself taking care of people that, I'd say, look, you need to go down to UT Southwestern because you've got this autonomic dysfunction. You keep passing out and no one can figure out what it is. And I've sent you to the cardiologist that's 2 hours away, but no one can figure it out. And they'd go and they'd make these really long trips. And maybe the distance that they had to travel is what said to me, something doesn't sit right. There's more to this. They'd travel 5 or 6 hours to go down to Baylor, for example. And they'd come back and the diagnosis wasn't any different than what I gave them. And all that had happened was the physician changed from one brand of medicine to another. And I thought, this is crazy. I know I don't know as much as the specialists know, so there must be some disconnect. So I started to go to my continuing medical education, which we're always required to do to stay current on our licensure. Started to go to some CME that looked more into the endocrine system and why do people have problems with their fatigue or their sort of menopause symptoms, and why is it that people have degenerative joint disease that we can't seem to fix. Again, living in this little tiny town, it gave me a lot of autonomy. There was not an orthopedic surgeon for 2 hours, so no one was going to tell me, hey, you can't inject that person's knee with, platelet-rich plasma because you're not a specialist. So my partner and I started to do some of these things, and seeing the patients travel these distances and not get any change made me say, well, I think the problem is the medical system. It's not the patients. So I better learn more if I'm going to help these people better. So after having, my partner and I, it was a small hospital, right? 13 beds. I was the chief of staff for 2 or 3 years. Then he'd be the chief of staff. Then I'm the chief of staff. We get to do whatever, I'm in charge. I'm the boss. No one's going to say, don't do that. We had patients that would go to the VA for their orthopedic care coming in, and we're giving them injections in their knee of Synvisc and platelet-rich plasma and growth hormone, which was really unheard of. We weren't, we're just accepting their insurance to do this because the Synvisc was covered. The other things weren't covered, but we had people coming from as far away as Houston, Texas, and that was about a 9-hour drive. Because we were doing these innovative things, we didn't really even know how, innovative we were being. But what happened was doing some of these things and seeing these patients start to get better by taking care of their thyroid better, or taking care of their hormones better. It really shed light on the fact that what's typically done in a medical office only scratches the surface of what should be done. Instead of treating health, what we mostly treat is disease. And once that became apparent to me, that we're not really doing anything to help people be healthy, all we're doing is waiting for them to get sick and then papering over those symptoms with some sort of a medication, that's when I started to change my practice. Around that same time, my father-in-law turned 80, and my wife is the youngest of 7, and she's the only daughter. And so we moved to Utah to be closer to my in-laws so that we could really just look after and care for them. So I started a practice at that point that was purely an integrative practice. Once you're willing to think outside the box and take care of patients to try and help them be healthy as opposed to just treat their disease and their disease symptoms, the floodgates open. People come and see you and say, oh, you'll listen. And I think that goes back to that experience that I had as a freshman in college, which I really like to talk to people.
I know you speak all over the country and maybe even all over the world to your profession and to others. So what is it that you primarily coach other professionals that you're such a sought after speaker?
I don't know why I'm sought after, but I think it's because we do need to have a paradigm shift in medicine of listening to our patients. And if we'll do that, we'll actually help them. There's been a paternalistic sort of attitude in medicine for years and years, and that has actually changed. I'm not a pioneer in changing that, I don't think. Maybe I'm on the tail end of being a pioneer, but it's been a really difficult change to say, wait a minute, the patient should be the person that's in charge here. We work for them. And part of the reason why that's such a problem is because we have a medical system where actually doctors don't work for their patients. Doctors work for the insurance company. The insurance company pays them. The patient may pay for the insurance, but the doctor's at the mercy of the insurance company for what they're supposed to do. And so there's a disconnect, and there's an inability for doctors to truly work for their patients because their patients aren't holding the purse string. And so I think that's part of why the problem persists. As patients start to, I love this, like you look online and there's all these websites for life hacking, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because people are now beginning to take back over ownership for their health instead of saying, well, what's in my healthcare benefits? What does Humana cover? What is Aetna going to cover? They're starting to not look at it that way, and they're starting to say, what matters for my health? And so if we as physicians start to say, how can I listen to my patient and fulfill the need they have, instead of simply say, oh, well, on the checklist, I'm supposed to check their blood pressure and their cholesterol and talk to them about not smoking. I would, patients would come in and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, well, I already know they don't smoke. And he exercises and he's pretty healthy. What am I going to do for him? Right? Mm-hmm. Because none of the things on my checklist mattered. That's because I was in that old model of I'm working for their insurance company and what's on the list. Nothing that matters, nothing that pertains to this guy because he's taking care of himself. What's crazy is that person that's taking care of themselves by eating right, by meditating, by paying attention to their relationships, by getting enough sleep, all of those things that make us healthy. There are things that I could have done for him, and I just didn't know it at that time. And now I know. Now there are things that I can do for him that are actually anti-aging. I can do things that will help his cellular function, help his detoxification pathways. And that's what he wanted me to do, years ago when he would come to the doctor in Texas. I just didn't know because I didn't work for him. I worked for his insurance company. So I guess to answer the question, if I'm sought after, it would be because I'm trying to help. And doctors feel this because we're people, right? And we say, oh, that makes sense. I need to connect with my patients in a way that they need me, instead of just say, oh, I work for Humana, and this is what they want me to do for them.
Right. That's great. I know at WholeHealth Medical Group, which is there in Utah, as you say, you have certain patients that you see there. Can you tell us a little bit about what is your most common patient, and what if I was to look you up on the internet, which is wholehealthmedicalgroup.com, what would I find there if I was seeking out services there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've tried to explain this a number of different ways, and I think the way I have the most success with is if people are familiar with the bell curve, right? A bell curve goes sort of like this. In the middle, you've got your middle like 70%. And then you get out to the edges and you've got about 14% on either side. And then those after the second standard deviation, you've got the top 3 and the bottom 3%. And that's really who we see, because the healthiest 3% or 5% of the country, those are people, the reason they're healthy is because they want to be healthy. They do things proactively to feel better. And those people seek out doctors like myself who say, hey, I'm not just going to check your cholesterol. I'm going to do an extensive battery of labs that's going to tell me what is your homocysteine, what's your genetic profile, your methylation, your COMT genes, how well do you make neurotransmitters, all of those sorts of things. And so we see a large contingency of those patients. Probably 40% of my patients I would categorize as anti-aging. And they have taken it upon themselves and said, look, there's a lot of things I can spend my money on, but the thing that matters to me is how I feel. And so I'm going to use some of my resources to buy a supplement or to buy a product that will help me feel better, or to be on medications that really help as opposed to just paper over a symptom. The other 60%, and it's sad to me that this is the case, sad for them, but the other 60% of my patients are chronically ill patients. And that's the case because they're in that bottom 3% of health. They are the sickest of the sick. The current medical system fails to help them with what they have. If you go to the doctor with fibromyalgia, or chronic fatigue syndrome, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, or Lyme disease, or even something as common as menopause, the medical system doesn't have they are not structured for you. And that's a shame. And we marginalize a lot of those people. Even depression, we say, oh, well, here, take some Zoloft. Oh, that didn't work. We'll take some Select. Oh, that didn't work. And we just go through this list of pills. And if we get to the end of the list of pills, we're like, well, I'm sorry, right? And that's really a travesty. So a huge chunk of my patients are those people, because the thing that we do is we personalize what's going on, right? And there actually is a physiologic cause for every one of those things I just listed. What we fail in Western medicine to do is look for the physiologic cause. And whether that's diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis or depression, there's an underlying thing happening physiologically. And I shouldn't say, oh, look, I did the hard work of giving you the right diagnosis. And based on what my medical school training was, this is the pill to help you. That's a failed model. What I should do is I should say, look, I've investigated all of the physiology that's going on in your body. And with you as a patient that has fibromyalgia, you've got pain, you've got headaches, you've got fatigue, you've got nausea, all these problems. Well, let's take a look and see what's happening. Your thyroid's low, your hormones are a mess, you've got chronic Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, Lyme disease, Bartonella, you've got toxins, you've got high heavy metals. This is a long list of problems. I can't fix it just by giving you some thyroid. And I certainly can't fix it by giving you a painkiller or an antidepressant. But let's go through those one at a time, and let's treat each of those different things. Let's help you detoxify. Let's help support your immune system. Let's help improve your mindset. That's a huge thing for these people that are chronically ill. Is they start to that's how they define themselves. And when I can start to overcome that, that's how you and I connected, is with BrainTap. When I can start to overcome how they have defined themselves as a sick person, and that's who they are, they can really begin to heal. And until they can do that, it's almost they have defined their limitations by saying, this is who I am. I'm an ill person. Because I think people that are healthy define themselves in lots of ways. I'm a guitarist, I'm a singer, I'm an athlete, I'm a dad, I'm a doctor. All these different things that we say, this is who I am. But you talk to somebody with chronic illnesses, and they say, I'm a Lyme patient, or I'm a disappointment to my family because I can't get out of bed. And it's heartbreaking as a physician to have to take these patients that have been marginalized to that extent and try to help them see and say, no, that's not true. I'm a mom, or I'm a student, or I'm a pianist. Whatever thing they used to love, I have so many dancers and gymnasts that pushed their body to the limit, and then they fell apart, and they don't say I'm a gymnast anymore. And that breaks my heart. And so with BrainTap, when you can get them to start to have that recovery, that emotional recovery of saying, oh, I'm not a sick person. I'm a person that has an illness. That's okay, but I'm 1,000 other important things. They can start to heal. But it's that holistic approach. It's that holistic approach of saying, how's your immune system? What infections do you have that you're not adequately fighting? How's your ability to detoxify? What toxin levels do you have? How's your endocrine system handling this? how are your neurotransmitters? Do you have enough GABA and serotonin to feel at peace? Do you have enough dopamine to feel like you should get out of bed? And when you look at all of those things, it's so rewarding to see people improve over time. So those are my patients. The patients that are easy are the anti-aging patients, and the patients that are really meaningful, motivating, and make me get out of bed in the morning are the patients where I say, wow, I think I made a difference.
Right. In talking with you, I understand that you have an intention, at least, to go out and train other doctors who have the same mindset, that might be tired of the old checklist and looking for something new. Tell us a little bit about your plans of expansion and educating, because I do think we need to kind of shake up the medical community, because if not, everybody's going to be so sick, we're not going to be a country anymore. I think it's going to cripple the economy.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. So I have a number of physicians that, when you go to these CME conferences, you can talk to other doctors, you're like, wow, this is so refreshing to know that there are physicians that care about making things better. And so I've got a friend of mine, Paul Savage, who's in Chicago. Another friend of mine, Gary Hubner, who's in Ohio. Another friend, Kent Holtorf, who's in California. And we talk together at these conferences, and we'll get on the phone together and say, okay, how are we going to make this different, right? How are we going to change medicine so that people really can, one, be healed from these chronic illnesses, whether it's those things I listed or things that you wouldn't even think of, like type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease, or depression, which affects 25% of our nation, right? Or obesity, which affects now 50% of our nation, or 40% at least. How are we going to change that? Well, what we talk about is, look, we need to have a consortium of physicians that do this and that are bringing in more and more doctors. I'm a member of ILADS, that's the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society. And I joined ILADS, I think 6 or 7 years ago, when I saw my first Lyme patient and said, oh my heavens, this person can't get out of bed, and they have joint pain, and they have headaches, they have cognitive dysfunction because of this infection. I better learn about it. It turns out their problem is far more than just that one bacterial spirochete. Joining ILADS was a big deal because they're sort of marginalized, and those doctors are the pariahs, they're the kooky doctors. Every year since I joined, I have paid for another physician to go with me so that they can learn about these patients. I just make it an important thing to sponsor helping other people go sort of open their eyes. I think I do that because my partner that was in Texas, he went to a conference before I did on anti-aging, and he came back with so much enthusiasm. And he said, you have to go to this. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, there's this other conference. It's in Florida. My kids want to go to Disney. Just go. I know this is in Chicago, and I know that's not as pretty, and it's November, and it might be cold, but suck it up and go. And I did. And I wouldn't have done that if somebody had not proselytized me and said, you have to go learn this because you owe it to the people. You owe it to yourself. Your integrity as a physician isn't what it could be if you don't learn this. So currently we're looking at sort of changing our footprint from WholeHealth Medical Group to a larger group of physicians who work together, because there are things, like I mentioned, Dr. Savage or Dr. Hubner, there are things that they know that I don't know yet, and that's medicine. It's funny because we collaborate. When I worked with Dr. Hackey at the hospital in Texas, we collaborated. Well, when I started my own practice, you're on an island because nobody wants to be associated with this guy that's going to do things differently, right? So I'll call the other physicians here in Utah, and they're like, oh, he's that kooky doctor, right? we have to sort of look for each other and say, hey, I'm willing to think outside the box. And then I can get on the phone at any moment and call or text these other docs, even though they're cities away. And it's going to improve the life of my patients right here in Utah. And I have patients that live probably in at least 30 of the 50 states. I have patients that fly to my office. I have patients that fly to my office from outside the country. I've got a lot of patients from Canada. I've got patients from Mexico. And I collaborate with physicians in other countries, in Mexico and Peru, because there are things that we can't do here in the United States that the science supports. They can do them in Europe. They can do them in, they can do them in Asia, Korea, Japan. They can do them in South America, but we can't do them here yet. And so I think patients should be given choices. They shouldn't be given limitations. I don't necessarily say you need to go to see my friend Dr. Morales in Puerto Vallarta, but I say here are the things that science has proven, and these are the things that you can't do here. So if you want to do a stem cell treatment that we don't offer, here are some of your choices, right? And then let people, I think, I'm a bit of a libertarian. People should be able to choose.
Mm-hmm. I agree too. So I know that just recently you were featured in on the television. I mean, we heard about it, and then you called us a couple days later because our footprint's pretty big in the United States too. And they said, hey, there's this group in Utah, and they showed the BrainTap on the television and things like that. So tell us a little bit about that treatment plan, because I think that is very different. Just to give the audience a little bit of an idea of how you're into that field of infinite possibility of choosing other things that most doctors wouldn't even consider.
Sure, and I feel silly for not even mentioning that. This is something that we started doing 18 months ago with one particular patient, but now it's blossomed, and we've done this for scores of patients now. I mean, we're at least 25, somewhere between 20 and 40 patients. We started treating addiction with amino acids. Had a patient who had done a lot of harm to his brain with drug use and began to have drug-induced schizophrenia, hallucinating constantly. And when you do what I do, you do just a lot of reading to say what could help, because I know what's going on with his brain. He's not making enough serotonin and GABA, and he's making dopamine like crazy. And that excess dopamine is making him hallucinate. What can help fix this? And amino acids are the building blocks of these neurotransmitters. Everybody's heard the story about turkey makes you sleepy. Well, we only hear that because we're sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner. It's not the turkey, it's eating too much. But turkey does have a thing in it called tryptophan, and tryptophan is the building block for serotonin, and serotonin becomes melatonin, and melatonin makes us sleep, right? And so it's true. If I have tryptophan, and you can get it in a lot of foods besides turkey, I'm not going to have as much depression because I'll have serotonin, and I'll sleep better because I'll have melatonin. And if I have zero tryptophan, I'm going to have neurotransmitter problems, right? So we started a program, we call it WholeHealth Recovery. And we treat now patients that have opiate addiction, methamphetamine addiction, alcohol addiction. What's been most remarkable to me is process addictions, pornography addiction, gambling addiction, food addiction. Those things respond just as well. And that's because in our brain, we have a reward loop. And in the reward loop, it's built in because we're biological. We need to survive, right? And so there are certain things that we get a reinforcement signal. We get a reinforcement signal from novelty because that's how we learn. We get a reinforcement signal from friendship because that's what keeps us safe. We get a reinforcement signal from sex because that's what keeps the genes going. And we get a reinforcement signal from food because that keeps us alive. We can hijack that reinforcement chain, and it can be hijacked with those things that we become addicted to, right? People don't become addicted to celery because it doesn't hijack the system. But people could become addicted to porn, and people could become addicted to food, and people could become addicted to a whole list of drugs. Why the drugs? Well, the drugs, because it just sort of plops into that dopamine chain, right? And so IV amino acids in combination with appropriate psychotherapy to help people figure out and manage the day-to-day. What triggered me to do that the first time? What was I lacking? Why did I go to cake when I was sad? Or why did I go to, birthday cake? Or why did I go to opiates? Or why did I, turn to gambling when I felt lonesome? Well, that's where I started using BrainTap more than anything. And it's exceptional. I mean, I got to tell you, my patients that we treat for, I would say cigarettes were the one where I said, look, take this home, use it every single day. They never have a craving. Once they've done their IV amino acids and they do their BrainTap, I can't tell you the number of people that are like, yeah, it doesn't even cross my mind. And once they're away from cigarette smoke for a certain period of time, they're like, yeah, it smells kind of bad, right? Then they're repulsed by it. Alcoholics, the same exact thing. And what's remarkable too is a lot of patients have sort of come out of the woodwork and said, look, I haven't had a drink or I haven't used cocaine in 10 years, but I still think about it every day. I still struggle every day, but I'm strong. I'm white knuckling it and I'm powering through. Well, we do the IV amino acids with them. And then we start them on BrainTap. And we have a psychologist who's at the University of Utah, Dr. Trish Henry. And we have this program. And they're like, I now feel like I'm actually cured. This idea of once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It turns out it wasn't true. Just nobody was able to heal my actual pathology. The underlying biology wasn't treated. And so we treat it, we get their biology right, then we get their psychology right, and they're free. It's really, really rewarding. So I love it.
Right. So how many other clinics do you think out there are doing something like this in the world?
Well, so the number of clinics that do IV amino acids is low. I would say in the world, I can't find more than 10 on the internet, maybe 15. They're hard to find. But what I think they haven't done well is put together an entire program. And that's where doctors like Dr. Savage or Dr. Holtorf or Dr. Moreno, we talk and say, look, we all, as innovative doctors, we find one thing that we're good at, but we don't build the whole program. And so I'm lucky enough to have a number of people on my staff that are excited about building the program. And so the whole enchilada, there's not another place that I know of. Being able to partner with somebody that's on the university staff at the University of Utah, which their health science center is renowned. It's a good medical school. And to be able to partner with a psychologist on their faculty, I don't know that there's another program that has that sort of dovetail into the mainstream. I actually was one of the keynote speakers at a narcotic addiction conference here in Utah that I was blown away that they would come and ask me to speak because what I do isn't mainstream. But after the conference, I can't tell you the number of not just physicians, but DEA officers and police officers that were like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that this is really, truly biological, that these people that I'm sort of throwing away as the dregs of society and we're putting them in jail, that if we could fix their biology, they could function. And they actually, when I see them and I see their broken families, they want to be a good dad or a good mom. Of course they do, right? And to be able to talk to those people, that was really rewarding because I think if we can dovetail this into mainstream, we will have revolutionized healthcare in America. That's really the next hurdle. It's not about finding out that these things are real. It's about helping them be accepted. You know, Semmelweis, and this will be an example that a lot of listeners maybe haven't heard of, but everybody gets to hear this story in medical school. There was a German physician named Semmelweis, and he showed all of his colleagues that the reason that the birth mortality was so high, the reason all the babies were dying that they were delivering, this back in the 1700s, 1800s, is because they weren't washing their hands in between deliveries. And the midwives who would go into the patient's home, they just delivered one baby, no infant mortality. Well, he died in an insane asylum because he was marginalized, and they said, you're nuts. We're not going to wash our hands. That's absurd. There's no science behind that. Well, that was before the germ theory of medicine, right? Mm-hmm. We need that same revolution. Once people start to say, oh, wait, these doctors that are finding these things that work, they're not crazy. They're maybe a little bit sort of on the edge of saying, hey, let's start to do this. People are dying of opiate addiction. People's lives are decimated by things like fibromyalgia. Let's stop waiting to do something about it, and let's normalize the real science let's normalize the treatment that the real science has proven. So that's exciting. That's right.
Yes, and that's partly why we're so excited to help you get the word out there. I think that the more doctors you can assist, obviously, you know, my background, the reason I'm in this is my dad was an addict. He was chronic alcoholic when he was alive, and so, but he got help. But it would have been a lot better if he still fought it every day, pretty much. So he was under the old school where you have to just one day at a time, you had to fight it and white knuckle it and do your thing.
That was my granddad quit drinking and quit smoking. And when he was in his 30s, I never knew him when he smoked or drank, right? And I asked him one time, I said, so was that hard? What was that like? And he said, it's interesting. I think every person's different. For me, I really haven't ever missed alcohol. If I smell smoke, oh, wow. What I wouldn't do. And he passed away long before I had this change in my career. But I think, wouldn't it have been nice to be able to give these amino acids to my grandfather? And wouldn't it have been nice to help him reprogram his brain so that he didn't feel that. He didn't constantly feel that hole in him, that he just had to be super strong, right? And it really comes down to biology and psychology, and that we can be healed. I don't think that there's a disease out there that we can't be healed of. We just haven't figured it out yet. So if we haven't figured it out, we got to keep on.
That's great. Well, we're almost done wrapping up this show today, and it's been fantastic. I think we could probably talk to you for a couple of hours and keep.
Yeah, I'm sorry I talk too much.
No, that's great. That's what we want. But if you can think just of all the things you've shared with us today, is there a question I haven't asked you that you want to tell us a little bit about your clinic or about your outlook on life or about where you see WholeHealth Medical Group morphing into that we haven't said already?
I guess I would just say, as physicians and as patients, we live in one of the most exciting times ever. We live in the information age, which is why things are revolutionizing. We live in a time where a patient can know more about what's going on than their doctor, not because they went to 4 years of medical school and 4 years of residency, but because they spent 4 hours every night trying to read about it online. And if we as doctors will listen to them when they come in and bring us an article, we'll be better off. And if patients will be patient with their doctors as we make that transition, we'll adapt, we'll learn, and we'll start to work together. And I really see that happening. There's a great book called The Patient Will See You Now. That changed me. That made me say, wait a minute, who am I working for? So to all the patients out there listening, be patient with us. We will catch up to the needs that you have.
For those doctors or patients that might want to look into more information about your group and about you, what do you recommend they do to learn more about you? And
yeah, our website is wholehealthutah.com. Go on our website, look at the things that we do. We are constantly doing another thing. And so it's not always all on there. I wish it were. In fact, I'm not even sure that the amino acids are listed on there. But call my office, talk to my office manager. My office, is I love my staff because they want to help people get well. Right. And so our office number is 801-607-5268. Call my office and just say, hey, I want to find out what you guys do. I have a partner, Ann Bowden, who's a nurse practitioner. She's phenomenal. She'll do a free consult with anybody that calls and sort of explain what we do, talk to you about what's going on, and see if there's some way that we can help. So a free consult is something that we always do with every patient that wants to find out if what we do can help them. So just call and say, look, I want a free consult with Ann.
That's great. Well, the price is right. So if they want to get well, I recommend they go there. I know that when I was visiting Utah, I went in to see you. You were out of town speaking, but I was a little bit under the weather, and they gave me it wasn't really the Myers drip or whatever, but it was some similar cocktail, and it knocked my flu out or whatever I was just about to get, and it was tremendous. I had to go to a show for 3 days afterwards, and I know one of your office staff, Craig, came by, and I'm like, I feel great. I mean, it was like, took me from being a low-level energy, fighting something, to just boosted it. And that's why I saw your room, which is designed perfectly. I mean, it has nice recliners, these human touch chairs, and you kick back and relax, and you're doing the IV drip. You can do the BrainTap at the same time. So, I mean, it's a fantastic, and you have other technologies in there that we didn't even get a chance to talk about. That
yeah, we have a bunch of technologies. We do. Yeah. We've got pulse electromagnetic field. We've got so many things. call and find out. I know that if you have a body, that there are things that we can do to help your body, right? Whether you're healthy, whether you're sick, that's how medicine should be. And there's other physicians out there that are just like me, and we just need to keep moving the needle in the right direction. And I appreciate what you do, Patrick. I think your technology added to my practice has changed the lives of hundreds of people. I wanted actually to tell a story, and I don't know if you have even time for it, but there was a little kid that came into my office, and he was bouncing off the walls. I was seeing his dad, and I said, while we're talking, do you mind if I just put this on your son, see if this will help him at all? And he's like, oh, he can't sleep. He'll be up till 3 a.m. He doesn't sleep at all. And in school, he's only allowed to call us 3 or 4 times a day during school. Well, we slip on the BrainTap, and this kid slumps down and falls asleep within 15 seconds. It was amazing. And when he took it off, we'd finished the visit. He was quiet enough that I could finish the visit with his dad. He took it off, and he turned to his dad and he said, "Can we take that home?" It was amazing. And this kid is like 7. It was amazing. And yes, they do have one at home. And his dad is like, you healed my kid. Max is so much different. So I just love that. I love that about medicine, that we should learn more and we should add more. So I appreciate what you do as well, Patrick.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing it for our listeners. So yeah, we do a lot with children, but we're here basically to tell people there is alternatives. And I think you're one of the pioneers in that. Whether you're on the tail end or the front end, most people out there, 95% of the people don't even know this exists. They think if it doesn't come with a prescription bottle, they can't be healed. And they don't understand that there's more to medicine than just prescribing or going through a checklist, as you said. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I hope that we can get some other doctors to give you a call, see how they can learn from you.
I love to talk to doctors and say, hey, I think this is a great way to learn about this. And so please call. You don't have to just call if you're a patient. So
that's great. And we will put all of your contact information on the podcast website, BrainTap Radio, so they can just go there if they didn't get a chance to write it all down. So the phone number will be there, the website, and we look forward to seeing you again once I'm in Utah again.
Get some snow here. You have snow there. We need it here so we can be together.
Yeah, it's a little, we could probably ski down in my front yard. Usually we see the neighbor kids come down and start, because we have a big hill out front of our house. So I don't think we could ski on it, but it's pretty good size. So that's great. Well, again, thank you for being a guest on the show. We look forward to learning more about what you're doing and helping to share that with the BrainTap universe that we have. And thanks for being a part of what we do.
You're welcome, and thank you so much. Stay warm.
This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC. To discover how you can have your own show completely done for you and turn it into a real published book and become the authority in your marketplace, go to www.marketdominationllc.com/podcast offer.